And welcome back to the Ruby Tuesday. Today I'm super excited to talk about the brand new miniseries that I've just finished watching. And good lord, this series was thrilling to watch. Of course, I'm talking about Sweetpea, starring the fantastic Ella Purnell, who you might know from the Amazon Prime video series Fallout, and of course Yellow Jackets. If you're into dark, twisted tales that explore what happens when someone is pushed to their absolute breaking point, then buckle up, because this one's for you. But is it worth your time? Let's dive in. So the plot overview and the themes is this. Sweetpea takes a deep dive into the psychological unraveling of a young woman named Rhiannon Lewis, played by Purnell. On the surface, she's living a pretty typical life, dealing with everyday pressures, trying to balance relationships and a dead-end job. But as the series pulls back the layers, you realize this isn't your average girl next door story. Rhiannon is a serial killer in the making. And what's fascinating here is that the show asks us not to just understand her, but to sympathize with her. Sounds a bit like Dexter, right? Except it's not a straightforward copy of that. Where Dexter played into the vigilante justice angle, Sweetpea goes in another direction. Dig into what happens when someone's constantly dehumanized, belittled, and pushed to their limits. The show explores how modern-day pressures, microaggressions, and trauma can quietly erode someone's sanity. Rhiannon isn't necessarily a good person, she's just a person. But after seeing the daily grind of her life, you understand why she snaps. And that's what makes this series so disturbingly relatable. It's a chilling reminder that under the right or wrong circumstances, anyone could break, and seeing what she goes through just in the first episode, I get it. The people in her life suck. They are bullies, and they are just all-round douchebags, douche nozzles, and the worst type of human beings in many regards that you can imagine. And when some start dying, the series then asks you, the viewer, as we voyeuristically watch as people reap what they have sowed, would you do this? Are you a serial killer in the making? Or could you be? And it's a disturbing thought process. So let's talk about Ella Purnell. She's the absolute heart of this series. And I've got to say, I think this is her best performance to date. She takes Rhiannon through a whole spectrum of emotions, from frustration to despair to straight up rage, while maintaining a vulnerability that draws you in. There are moments when she's terrifying, but then there are also quite reflective scenes where you really feel for her. It's a very tricky balance as a character. It's a very tricky balance for an actor to play who's both a victim and a predator. Purnell absolutely nails it. She's magnetic on screen, and it's impossible to take your eyes off her even when she's doing something pretty unspeakable things. It's not impossible to compare Sweetpea to other shows that tackle similar themes. Like I mentioned earlier, Dexter is an obvious point of reference. But where Dexter was always kind of morally clear, he's a serial killer, but he's only killing bad guys. Rhiannon in Sweetpea is much more morally ambiguous. Her victims aren't criminals. They are people who, in her mind, represent the constant unfairness and cruelty of the world. It's that unpredictability that sets Sweetpea apart. You never quite know where it's going, and it keeps you on edge throughout. There's also a comparison to be made here with Killing Eve, in the way both shows ask you to root for someone doing horrific things. But where Killing Eve has a more glamorous, almost playful tone with Villeneuve's antics, Sweetpea is darker, more raw. Rhiannon is messy, emotional, and unpredictable, and that adds to the series' intensity. So when we're talking about cinematography and direction, I think visually the series is very good to look at. It's a pretty series in a bleak sort of way. There's a lot of contrast between Rhiannon's mundane, drabbed day-to-day life and the vibrant, chaotic inner world she's hiding. The directors make sure that the camera work reflects this tension. There are moments when the visuals get almost claustrophobic, with tight shots that put you inside Rhiannon's head. And then there are wides, with wide empty spaces that reflect her emotional isolation. It's clever, unsettling, and incredibly effective. Let's not forget about the score. The music in Sweetpea has this pulsating, almost hypnotic quality to it. It's not just background music here, it's woven into the narrative itself. The beats are syncopated, a little off-kilter, which matches Rhiannon's own spiraling mental state. It reminded me a bit of Requiem for a Dream, where the score becomes a part of the tension. Here it's more subtle, but definitely leaves a lasting impression. So my final thoughts. Is Sweetpea for everyone? No. It's dark and disturbing and definitely won't leave you feeling warm and fuzzy. But for those who like psychological thrillers, it's an incredibly well done exploration of mental collapse and the thin line between victim and villain. It's a one and done miniseries, and I actually think that works in its favor. The story doesn't need to be stretched out. It hits hard, tells the tale, and leaves you with a lot to think about. At the end of the day, it's an enjoyable, disturbing ride. The acting is top-notch, the story is compelling, and the visuals and score work together to create a tense, gritty atmosphere. I give Sweetpea 4 out of 5 Nicolas Cages.
You got one.
So, if you're looking for something thought-provoking that doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of human nature, Sweetpea is definitely worth your time. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment about what are your favorite TV series with similar themes like this one. But as always, remember, live long on Tuesday.